Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. On the agenda tonight, we have Albert King and Stevie Ray Vaughan. These guys are going to be jamming along to Texas Flood, and this video is 15 minutes long, so I'm not going to have time to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to put the link to this in the description below, and also the link to another video where Albert and Stevie are just talking about Stevie's younger days when Albert used to call him up on stage for a little jam, and he actually says that he never realized Stevie would get so good at playing the blues. So it's a really interesting video to watch. That's before they actually start playing. But we're going to get stuck into when they actually start playing and see how they get on. So then Albert hands over to Stevie at that point. The first thing to note really on Albert's playing is the amount of bending that he does, and he controls the bend so well. Like so many of the greats, just really great bending. The only problem with doing so many bends is that what you'll find if you watch this whole video, Albert and Stevie are constantly just adjusting their tuning, the machine heads at the top of the guitar. They're just ever so slightly tweaking each string. Because they're bending so much, the tuning is going to go out, so they just have to adjust it every time. Another thing is the way that they hand off to each other within this jam. There'll be little points at which Albert might be soloing, like there he just calls out and throws it over to Stevie. And further on in this video, Albert will play just a tiny bit of lead at the end of the blues turnaround. So we're just about to go around for another time, and by inserting that little bit of lead just before the turnaround happens, it means that Albert's saying, right, I'm going to take it over from here, and Stevie of course can hear that and then follows suit and gets into the rhythm playing, and now Albert takes on the lead. And it's these tiny little cues and tiny little things that players do, and they understand what they mean musically and what their intentions are. So there's plenty of bands out there, and probably lots of musicians out there as well, that can identify with playing with other musicians where they don't necessarily know how to communicate, so that when you're playing, you might play a little bit of lead to then get into that next 12 bars or however long the progression is that you're playing in your blues, and the other player keeps playing lead. So now you've got two guys playing lead guitar, which is always going to sound bad unless it's been pre-worked out with harmony lines and all that kind of stuff. Just two guys doing their own separate lead is always going to clash. So those tiny little cues, you're absolutely depending on the other musicians picking them up and then conforming to where you want to take the music. When you get to the real top level, all the musicians in the band are on the same page. And like with this, we've got 15 minutes, almost 16 minutes worth of jamming where nobody plays anything wrong at any point because everyone's picking up on these musical cues that they're giving each other. Let's get stuck into a little bit more. Yeah. Great example there of the bends that Stevie's throwing in there. Again, remember the gauge strings that Stevie used to use, using a 13 on that high E string. Stevie plays the strings like they're 9-gauge strings. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't play guitar, you have thickness of strings, and on the high E string or your thinnest string, a 9 is quite thin, so it means it's easy to manipulate, easy to bend. When you start getting up to 10s, that's thicker. 11 is thicker, 12 is thicker, 13 is even thicker, and that's what Stevie used to string his guitar up with. Somebody picking up his guitar and then trying to do the same bends would have a shock as to how thick the strings were. They probably couldn't even do a half-tone bend. But yeah, so again, Albert just calls out and cues up that verse, to which now Stevie will start singing.
Down in Texas, all of the telephone lines are down.
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you.
Well, it's flooding down in Texas.
Yeah.
All of the telephone lines are down. Trying to call my baby, Lord, I can't get a single sound.
And the phone been cut off. You done paid the bill.
Flood water keep a rolling. Oops, wrong way. Man, I'm standing out in the rain.
Classic example there of how relaxed that mood is. Stevie messing up the words and kind of coming off the microphone and just saying to Albert that he messed up the words and laughing about it. It's such a cool vibe, this jam. It's really relaxed. And I just want to point out another thing about Stevie that often goes under the radar was his voice. Everyone focuses on that playing because he was such a great blues player, and some of the lines he threw together were so cool. But he's also got that bluesy voice as well. When he really pushes it, he gets that grit on his voice, and it really suits the music. So that perfect marriage of being able to play on the guitar, have a voice through your guitar, but then also actually have a voice that you could sing with as well, and really make those lyrics relatable to an audience. So Stevie Ray Vaughan, what a great voice he had as well.
Clouds keep rolling. Man, I'm standing out in the rain. Well, flood of water keep rolling. Man's about to drive poor Stevie Ray insane.
Again, that little bit of communication there where Stevie musically was waiting for Albert to maybe come in, and Albert just shouts, "Go ahead," gives him the green light to get into his lead playing, open up the tone a little bit and get into his lead work. And then a great change in dynamic there, going from Stevie's all-out lead, suddenly breaking off into that really quiet dynamic, letting Albert then play. And tone-wise here, we've not got a great deal going on. Tiny bit of overdrive on Stevie Ray's guitar. But in terms of Albert's sound now, just have a little listen to how clean this is. I'm just going to stop it there just to mention the fact that with Albert's guitar here, which he's called Lucy, he has Lucy and different makes of Lucy, but it's always called Lucy. Very similar to B.B. King in terms of getting, naming guitars, and with his Lucille. But Albert here, just looking at his hands just almost swallow the neck because they're so big. He's got such a command of that fretboard, and that's why he can get such great bends. It's just that strength in his hand. I don't think Stevie's got the same span as Albert in terms of the stretches that he can achieve, but certainly they've got that power on the fretboard that they can wrestle those strings if they want to. I'm just going to stop it there, else I'm just going to end up watching the whole thing. But Albert, the way that he's bending those strings, you can hear sometimes that the string is starting to go a little bit out of tune, ever so slightly, just because of the amount of bends that Albert does, and he's got such power on the fretboard. And just as a final point that I want to make about jams like this and watching top players, we've got a real insight here into 15 minutes of two of the best players jamming, working with each other, and how they do it and how they play. And you can see that there's very rarely ever any fast playing here. I'm talking about shredding or any long passages that are subconscious in terms of their pre-worked out lines that might last for a bar or 2 bars or 4 bars. Some players have lines that are pre-worked out that last for maybe 5 or 10 seconds at a time. But here, it's a great indication of conscious playing, where you are literally playing what you're thinking and you're almost singing in your head through the guitar. The top players can do that. So everything we're hearing is coming straight from their brain and from their emotion and what they want to play. At no point are they delving into a pre-worked out line that's going to last for 5 or 10 seconds. And this is going to be the case for the whole 15 minutes. So not only is this a really good video just to watch two of the great players jamming, it's also a great indication of that playing subconsciously and playing consciously, the difference between the two. What you'll find is that you can play up to a certain speed, and as soon as you get past that threshold, it's almost like a cliff. As soon as you push your speed too fast, it gets handed over to muscle memory. And your muscle memory will just repeat the lines that it's been told to do over those hours and hours and hours of practice. And there's always a cutoff point. No player in the history of ever has been able to shred and actually change every single note. They're always passages of 10 or 15 notes that have been pre-learned. But Albert King and Stevie Ray Vaughan, two absolute legends of guitar here, just jamming together. And what a great video this is, just to see them jamming for 15 minutes. It's such a rare thing to actually have on record. But I'm going to put the link to this in the description below, as well as that video where they're talking beforehand and Albert talks about Stevie coming to gigs and getting him up on stage. So that's an interesting watch, so I'll put that in the description as well. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at. Let me know what you guys think and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!